Hi, Hunter. Thank you so much. I'm great, thank you. I'm in Australia. I don't know if you know Brisbane, Australia. So it's a little bit later for us here than you are in New York.
Yes, it is tomorrow from me. Is that right? Or is it in the
That's
morning? Is it evening still?
no, like nighttime for us, like tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, it is legit tomorrow. That's well, welcome to the past. It's great to meet you in the future. And so Nora, before we jump into the questions here, is there anything you would like to share about your own career journey and this topic? You know, maybe I read a little bit about your bio, but is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Nora. I am a people and cultural leader. I'm also the founder of the Multicultural Professional Network, which was actually born from a passion for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We bring together all professionals on a platform so we can kind of network and kind of leverage our own personal development and career opportunities as well. And I'm based in Australia. So this is a topic that's really passionate for me as well.
Awesome. Well, we're so happy you're here. So we mentioned in in your intro here, this idea of cultural intelligence. So can you define what that is for our listeners that maybe haven't heard that before, or maybe you'd like to offer up something a little different to think about?
Yeah, sure. Probably the best place to start is I'll probably start with the definition from Harvard Business Review, which talks about what cultural intelligence is an outsider's seemingly natural ability to kind of interpret something that's unfamiliar and ambiguous in a way that that person's compatriots would. But if I were to put it really simple, or so simply, cultural intelligence kind of refers to CQ or cultural quotient, sometimes it's referred to, is that ability for people to relate from other people from other cultures. Now, that doesn't kind of mean that you're speaking, a different language. It's more about how you empathize and actively work towards understanding what the customs and the norms of cultures are that are actually outside of your own culture. So it can be like an extremely valuable social skills, especially in like an increasingly global world. Another thing to touch on is in 2015, David Livermore also published Leading with Cultural Intelligence. So if anyone's interested, that's a good book to kind of look at, where he actually identified the four main elements of cultural intelligence. One of which is that CQ drive. So you're having that motivation to thrive in cultural diverse settings. You also have that CQ knowledge where you've got the understanding of differences and the similarities between cultures. Then there's the CQ strategy where you've got the sense of self-awareness through that multicultural interaction, and a CQ action. So you then have that ability as a leader to just draw on those different behaviors for the different interactions. Why it's actually important is when you're determining what are my strengths and weaknesses in some of these areas, it can actually help you focus on how can you then improve your own cultural intelligence. And it can have a major impact if you're within a business, because we know that the business environment is a bit more global these days. Organizations are operating in really diverse markets. We are employing people from different cultural backgrounds. So having that high level of cultural intelligence is actually quite crucial for leaders in terms of them achieving success. And leaders kind of acknowledging that actually I have a role to play. Culture plays a really big part in my team as a leader. And I may need, in those instances, to actually adjust what my management style is. And that's understanding that every single member in your team is going to be unique. They're going to come with a unique background. And part of that is actually what's going to make them be that valuable asset to your team. So understanding how the cultural context is going to impact your team member is absolutely going to help you become a better leader.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. And I also appreciated at the top, and you're like, I'm going to keep it simple. I have to tell myself, keep it simple, sweetheart. You know, if there's a meaner way to say that to yourself, I adapted it to keep it simple, sweetheart. It's going to be okay. So I was able to understand that. Thank you so much. So you mentioned, everyone's unique on the team and that we can adjust to that. And when we have more voices in the room, obviously it's to greater success. So with those in mind, what are other things, and maybe we can dig deeper into those topics as well? Why is it important for leaders in today's why is, cultural intelligence important for today's globalized business environment?
So when I think, and that's a great question, Hunter, but when I actually just think about the global business environment right now, and I'm thinking about what's a high performing organization, for example, what makes them different from another organization? Is it because they've got this amazing strategy in place? Do they have better employees, for example, or they've got phenomenal products or amazing services? Now, I think all of those things can make a difference to an organization, but only for a really short period of time. But what ultimately I feel separates an organization in the global environment is ultimately the culture of an organization. It's something that when you have as an organization, you actually cannot replicate that. And that's what actually allows most organizations to actually sustain that competitive advantage. Now, we know when we're thinking about problems, especially in a global environment, we can't just solve it by one person. We can't just solve it by one culture. We sometimes can't even solve it by one continent. So having that adaptive cultural intelligence leaders within your organization who are harnessing the differences that they have within their team, rather than allow that to actually cause conflict, actually adds a really competitive edge to any businesses, because you're improving communication, you're improving cooperation, you're improving teamwork, and you're improving the overall performance of your business. So it's actually becoming really important in the business environment. And I think when as a leader, best part of managing team members who actually bring those unique perspectives and unique skill sets to the table is learning to lead with that cross-cultural empathy. So you'll factor in the fact that I have team members, but actually they are from different cultural backgrounds. And I have a multicultural team. I, as a leader, can benefit from having a diversity of opinion, diversity of thought on my team. I'm thinking as a leader that I want to unlock the impacts of the diverse teams that I have. I'm building the team synergies. I need to be able to manage this, and I need to really encourage teamwork in that cross-cultural setting as well. So I think to answer your question is probably first thing that comes to mind is developing those strong relationships that leaders can have with, whether that's the clients, the employees, the colleagues from diverse cultural backgrounds. And they're doing this because they understand cultural beliefs, the values, communication styles. They're building the trust, they're building the respect, they're fostering the teamworks, and they're minimizing any conflicts or misunderstandings. And I think another point would be it enables leaders to navigate the cultural differences, and they're adapting their leadership styles based on that, because they're trying to make sure that suits different cultural contexts. So a leader, for example, may need to think, oh my God, how do I communicate? How do I make decisions? And how do I resolve conflict to meet the expectations and norms of everybody on my team across all the cultural groups, rather than taking a one-size-fits-all approach? And I think it also helps, sorry.
Oh, please.
It also helps leaders to create that inclusive and diverse workplaces. So you're embracing and you're valuing cultural differences. You're promoting diversity. You're promoting inclusion. You're creating a safe and respectful workplace environment that's also encouraging open communication, respect, mutual understanding within the team. So I think it's about, if I just summarize, it's you're understanding different cultural contexts. You're developing strong relationships. You're navigating cultural differences. Ultimately, you're promoting diversity and inclusion. And we say to people in the multicultural professional network, for example, is embrace, develop your own cultural intelligence, and recognize that it's actually important for your own personal and professional growth. So hopefully that, in summary, helps.
Oh, absolutely. I loved when you were speaking there, the learning to lead with cross-cultural empathy is so beautiful, and I just feel sums up what is so important, and then you went on to highlight valuing and promoting other folks and respect and mutual understanding, like all of that, all of that involves and takes empathy on the behalf of the leaders, right?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can leaders develop their cultural intelligence, this cultural, cross-cultural empathy, and what are some practical tools and strategies that they could use?
It's a great question, Hunter. The first thing that really comes to mind is to be able to develop cultural intelligence, the leader has to actually start with a willingness to learn and having that curiosity about different cultures and be open-minded, having an open mind and an open approach to that willingness to actually educate themselves is probably one tool I would say, or strategy. I'm thinking now, I'm as a leader, I really want to learn about different cultures. I'm actively reading books. I'm actively attending cultural events. There's many, many online resources that many leaders can kind of read to help them understand different cultural perspectives and different cultural behavior. So I think that's one strategy a leader could take. The other thing is engaging in cross-cultural interactions. So you can learn a lot as a leader just by simply interacting with people from different cultural backgrounds. I say to some leaders as well, spend time with people who don't look like you and who don't think like you. You'd be surprised at some of the things that you actually learn. It's really, really simple. Attend international conferences, participate in global networking events, engage in cross-cultural mentoring or coaching. Another strategy, maybe seeking feedback. Just asking for feedback from whether that's your employees, your colleagues, or clients, depending on your working environment, on how you can actually improve your cultural sensitivity and identify, I as a leader, is there any blind spots for me? Do I have any areas that I need to improve on as well? And there's also cultural intelligence assessments. When we talk about tools as well, there's plenty of them. What that can do is actually help leaders think about what's the baseline that I'm starting from? What are some of my strengths? What are some of my weaknesses when I am in cross-cultural situations? And provide some insight into how some leaders can actually improve their own cultural intelligence and adaptability as well. And probably another one, I say build diverse teams. Now, I wouldn't just say just build diverse teams. I think there's another layer to that. If you just go out and go, I'm a leader, I'm just going to go and recruit everybody from a diverse team, but they come into your team from different cultural backgrounds, and you're not creating a workplace culture that's valuing diversity and inclusiveness. So you have to take that next active step to do that, create opportunities for leaders to learn from your team members, and actually you personally thinking, I'm going to develop my own cultural intelligence so everybody feels welcome within my team. Learning about holidays, important events that are culturally meaningful to your team members, and you demonstrating that interest and thinking, how can I make my team feel more comfortable and more welcome on my team? And once you learned about what your team members' culture is, I think you can't just learn, you got to apply your learning to the actions that you take as a leader as well. A good example I would give is one of your team members is observing a religious holiday, they're fasting during the day. You as a leader would think, okay, maybe I'll not eat or drink in front of them. It's a very, very small thing, but these small things actually can help you increase the comfort of people that are within your team as well. I also say, talk to your team about how do they like to communicate? How do they like to get feedback? Some people are more comfortable with direct feedback. Some people are more comfortable with indirect feedback. So when you understand and get to know your team and understand what they need, it's about thinking, what does my team need to feel heard, welcome at work, and how can I get them comfortable on my team? So I think to summarize, developing cultural intelligence requires a leader's commitment to learn, engage with different cultural contexts. And when you think about tools and strategies such as educating yourself, the cross-cultural interactions, the feedback, the empathy, doing assessments, and building diverse teams, I think that goes a long way to kind of improve leaders' cultural intelligence and adaptability.
I love the apply your learning as a leader, right? We can, great to be a sponge, keep learning, but you got to put it into action.
Yeah, very, very important. Because I think you can read the book, right? But it's like, how do you apply it? You have to apply what you've learned. Otherwise, it's no point. Yeah.
Yeah. I also love the highlight of cross-cultural mentoring. I think that's a really wonderful gem in there for us to remember, because I think it's easy for folks to be like, oh, that person looks like me, they sound like me, they have what I want, they have a career path that I like, I'm going to talk to that person, but can actually create these silos within companies, right? And if we're promoting, and they're like, oh, if there's someone in charge of maybe helping folks find a mentor, they might help guide someone towards someone that they might not have chosen on their own, right?
That's absolutely right. Correct, Anta. Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And just also the idea, like you've said too, of talk to your team. This is like the part of that's in action, right? Like, how do they want feedback instead of, oh, well, I read that this culture likes this type of, well, no, that's still a generic thing. Maybe there's some truth in some of it, but you need to talk to the individuals to get what they want, because it's going to be different for every single person, right?
That's absolutely right. And that's that commitment from the leader saying, actually, I'm going to actively get to know my team. So, yeah.
Yeah. So here we are highlighting some things that are useful for leaders to do. Are there, in your experience, can you identify some common mistakes that leaders might make when working with diverse teams, and perhaps how these mistakes could be avoided?
Yes, sure. I say to people, working with diverse teams can be challenging, but it absolutely a rewarding experience for leaders as well. And some of the mistakes I can kind of think of, I'll give you some examples. The first one, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, assuming that one size fits all approach as a leader. You assume that what works in one culture is absolutely going to work in all cultures. What then happens is that could lead to misunderstanding, miscommunications. So I think when we talk about some of the tools and strategies, when you've taken that time as a leader to learn about the cultural values and norms, you're adjusting your leadership styles accordingly. That's some of the ways that can actually be avoided as well, because you've actively gone to build up your own cultural intelligence. Another thing I also see, failing to recognize and address biases. Leaders some may hold unconscious biases towards team members from different cultural backgrounds. And that is going to impact sometimes decisions that they make, performance evaluation. So I think leaders stopping to engage in self-reflection, being aware that some of these biases may be there, and then taking the steps, like I said, is not, okay, I've done an assessment, this is things I need to improve on, and then, okay, I'm just not going to do any steps to address them. So you got to take the steps to address them. And that will be using some of the tools and strategies that I talked about earlier on. Another thing I see is equal opportunities for growth. I think it's important as a leader that all team members have equal opportunities for growth. And that has to be regardless of their cultural background. And it also probably ties into the earlier point, which is if there's some biases, thinking about what are the steps I need to take and make sure every single member of my team has equal opportunities, regardless of where they're from. Ignoring cultural differences is probably another one, I would say. And this one is actually quite common. I'll just ignore cultural differences. Everyone is the same. We're all the same here. We all have the same values and beliefs. And again, that can lead to misunderstanding and conflicts. I think a better approach as a leader is actually acknowledge that your team is different. Everybody is different. And actually acknowledging that and celebrating those differences. And you as a leader stopping to promote that culture of inclusion and respect. It's a much better way to go than actually treating everybody absolutely the same, especially when they're from different cultural backgrounds as well. Probably not listening to feedback is another one that I see. So when you're getting feedback, failing to address concerns, especially when they're related to cultural differences. So I would say actively listen to feedback, take the steps to address them as well is pretty key as well. I think some of those is what I can say that are common that I've seen when working with diverse teams. So I think when you recognize that you're working with a diverse team, you are adopting a culturally sensitive and inclusive approach, you're recognizing some of your biases, you're providing equal opportunity, also acknowledging cultural differences and actively listening to feedback. I think leaders can build that strong and effective diverse teams.
Yeah, there's so much in there. And we have just about less than 10 minutes left.
I
We
know,
have
I was looking at the time. I could talk
no, it's
about
just
this.
like boom, boom, boom. I mean, this is a master class, friends, with Nora here. So, and we have a question from the audience too, and so hopefully we can touch on that before we wrap up, Nora. So we were talking about, there's some of the highlights there and some of the common mistakes. So I think you've touched on this, but are there any other suggestions you would have that you have for organizations to help foster cultural intelligence and promote it throughout their company?
Yes, absolutely. There's a few things that organizations can do. I think training is probably the most, easiest thing for an organization to put in place. Offer training programs, offer workshops to kind of help employees understand different cultural differences, learning how to communicate and work effectively from people with other diverse backgrounds. And this can be like online courses, group sessions, or one-on-one coaching. Another one is celebrating diversity. So very similar to my point around a leader acknowledging the differences as well. So you're celebrating, you're recognizing different cultures and traditions within your own organization or workplace. Diwali, Chinese New Year, Black History Month, and encouraging employees to actually share those cultural experiences and traditions. Again, with this one, don't celebrate one thing and then ignore the other. Because again, it's not going to really create any inclusive environment for you as an organization. But what I would say with that is, for organization, lean on your ERGs, because they will be quite key in driving some of this stuff for you as an organization to make sure that you actually are celebrating every single aspect of diversity within your organization. And just, make it integral part of your company's purpose, mission, values, right? If that's part of your culture, you're celebrating diversity, you're encouraging cultural intelligence all through your whole employee life cycle. You're recognizing and rewarding people who actually are demonstrating these skills. I think that would be another way to foster that culture as well. I will also say recruiting and retaining diverse employees. You're encouraging diversity in your hiring and retention practices. And that's you recruiting from diverse talent pool, creating that inclusive workplace that values diversity as well. So use organizations like Power to Fly, Partner, and really think about, how can I recruit? Again, you can't just recruit a bunch of people. You got to make sure you're retaining them. And how you retain them is creating that environment of inclusivity and belonging that would make them stay as well. So look at your key metrics. Are the people we're recruiting, are they staying with us? Pretty key as an organization. So you need to have that commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as an organization. You need to have that ongoing education and training. You need to make sure everybody within your organizations feel valued and they also feel respected as well. Those are some of the key things I would say.
Yeah, and I love how you were mentioning earlier to make sure you're incorporating and celebrating all things and not just cherry picking certain things, because what that sounds like to me, that could be an unconscious bias, right? By folks just being like, oh, well, this one's going to hit, cover more folks, so I'm going to do that one. But the person choosing those things is choosing from a place of an unconscious bias. So how do you address unconscious bias and the importance of cultural intelligence in hiring and in promotion, and also these other, DE and I and B things that might come up in the workplace?
Yeah, I think, Hunter, for me, is that lack of diversity sometimes within an organization may even actually hamper them from the recruitment process to kind of attract and retain that top talent from diverse backgrounds. Because now we know with the job market, employees are the ones asking the questions like, how do you create a culturally safe environment for me when I come to work for you? Why does your executive board look like that? So I think companies need to be prepared to answer those questions. But I think in terms of that recruitment, hiring, promotion process, educating your decision makers is quite key. Again, back to some of the training that I talked about, if they're part of that training and education piece that you're doing as an organization, it should help kind of mitigate some of that. Using an objective criteria is another one. So let's recruit for skills and capability, right? Let's evaluate candidates based on the skills that are relevant to the job requirements, that's going to help a long run to kind of reduce any personal biases in that decision-making process as well. And also diversifying your selection panel, pretty critical, right? Because ensuring that your selection panel has members from every single diverse backgrounds. So they're providing the different perspective and reducing the impact that you might have of personal biases as well. And another one is the blind resume screening. I know some companies already do this because there was that UK research, I don't know if you heard of it, where a lady had applied with a different name and she had less applications, and then applied with this name and she had, more applications, but it was exactly the same resume. So I think sometimes just removing identifying information such as name, gender, race, and resume during that initial screening process can be quite key as well. And developing a pipeline of diverse candidates is pretty important. So when you develop relationships with people who serve communities to create your diverse candidate pipeline, partnerships, Power to Fly, colleges, university, community groups, and also, again, monitor and track the progress. How are we doing in our, D&I efforts, in our hiring and promotion process? What do we need to change? What are areas for improvement? How are we measuring the impacts of some of the initiatives that we're doing as an organization as well? For us to kind of create a more inclusive workplace that actually is valuing diversity and attracting, most importantly, retaining top talent from diverse backgrounds. So I say to people, cultural diversity is a gift as an organization. How to manage a cultural diverse team actually is what it takes to practice. So part of this is like you build up your cultural intelligence, like any interpersonal skills, you build cultural intelligence. It actually takes time, but when you invest in that, it reflects in your team's ability to be able to bring their whole and full selves to work. And that's why diverse talent stays. I could talk about this forever.
And I wish we could, Nora. We have to have you back. I don't know if you see the chat. You're getting flooded with questions. This is sparking so much thought in our listeners, and we could do another half hour, 45 minutes, hour day summit with you, Nora, of going with these questions and hearing more from what you have to say. Unfortunately, we're out of time though. How can folks stay connected with you? Is LinkedIn the best way? What are ways that folks can make sure to keep up and learn more from what you're helping with?
Yes, LinkedIn is probably the best for me. So it's Nora Fraser on LinkedIn. So please connect with me if you want to. Absolutely. And if you wanted to connect with the organization, multiculturalprofessionalnetwork.com.au as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nora. I hope we get to do this again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening in Australia.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Hunter. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.